All right, you guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started. The main take home, so we are progressing to the major muscles that function at the trunk. And the biggest take home from this, I'm hoping that my students will not play the core card. Like, I'm working core, I'm working core. I have no problem with that verbiage used when you're working with like a patient. But we have to know which specific muscles we're using when we're doing certain things, because there may be certain palsies, there may be certain conditions, there may be certain issues where we don't need to recruit certain muscles and we need to activate others. And I need to teach you how to know when we are, when we're not just kind of hoping that we get what we get, okay? 310 review. Let's identify, because remember, on your circles don't tell you if something's working. Your circles just tell you who pulls in what directions. 310 helps you to light up what section you need. Flexors, extensors, right laterals, left laterals, right transverse, left transverse. So based off of our external forces in this exercise, we understand who we need because why we need it. The dumbbell is trying to do what to his trunk? Bend him left laterally. So the way I look at it is, I figure out who I don't need. If the dumbbell is trying to bend him this way, I don't need muscles that are pulling that way. I need to do a cartwheel. The dumbbell is trying to bend him to the left. I need muscles that are trying to bend you to the right. True? So when I visualize my circle, that's who's lighting up. I need right lateral pullers. Concentric work or positive work is going to be when I observe that motion that those muscles are pulling it. So if I'm using my right laterals, when I see right lateral, like from there to there, that has to be positive work, concentric work. If my right laterals are working and I observe left lateral, positive pulling muscles allowing motion in the opposite direction, that's negative work, that's eccentrics. Make sense? Here's the key. There are some students, and that's okay, that's my job, is to teach you. There are some students that would swear I'm using one side of my belly button to do one motion and the other side to do the other motion. And I'm like, that's fascinating. That's like saying if I'm doing curls, I'm using my bicep to bring it up and using my tricep to lower it down. You know darn well you still feel it in the same place. Make sense? Because we cannot identify specific muscles with specific motions without the context of the contraction. All right? Does everybody understand? I would need right laterals, eccentric to allow left lateral bending, concentric to create the right lateral bending of the same muscle. This is why you don't want to do side bends. I mean, maybe for movement, that's fine. But if he had two of the same size dumbbells, he wouldn't be working those angles the same, because the weight on the other side would kind of be the counterbalance to it. You wouldn't need your muscles if you have a dumbbell trying to bring your teeter-totter back. Make sense? All right, let's do a couple more practices before we get into the muscles. If you guys think this is helpful. Trunk flexors or trunk extensors? Don't answer it out loud. Give it some thought. Use the tools that are coming back to you from Breeze In. What would happen if I had a remote control and I turned off all the muscles and she kept her toes and her elbows? What would happen to her trunk? Motion would happen to her trunk if you turned off all the muscles. That can help us visualize what the external forces are trying to do. And then how I do it is say, well, if the external forces are trying to do that, I don't need muscles that want to do that too. I don't need muscles that are trying to do the other side. The other opposite. Would I need flexors or extensors? Flexor. Absolutely. Because if she relaxes, heck, hold the, what is, I think there's a meme that's like the longest 1 minute of all time is trying to hold a plank. If you hold a plank, forgive my violent shaking. If you hold a plank, you take a break, what happens to your trunk? It extends. Because ground and gravity is trying to extend you. So you got to use your flexors to flex. Your flexors to prevent you from extending, or your flexors to allow the extension. Positive, negative word. But you know what didn't influence my motion there? My extensors. If my extensors would have turned on, I would literally pull my arms off the ground. Does that make sense? Remember those? Now, the cervical would be the extensors, but that's because our head isn't pushing on something. Like if her head was on a brick or something, then it would be the cervical flexors. We do not assume just because it's the bottom of the trunk doesn't mean it can't be the top of the neck. It depends on what the external forces are trying to do. So when I give you the muscles and I give you the circles or I give you the list, how I want you to do it is not go straight into muscles. Who do I need? Because I understand why I need them. Where do those muscles sit, or how do those muscles pull? And then who are those muscles? That'll keep you from making mistakes. Let's go transverse. Let's go ahead and infer that that thing is not pushing on him. Pulling. So I want you to identify if he's using right or left transverse trunk rotators. We figure out who we need because we understand why we need them. Did I tell you my law that it's impossible to look normal and natural for any kind of like fitness photo? Like, just look normal. They're all like, can't, you gotta sneak it, I guess. You gotta sneak the picture. All right, that TheraBand is trying to twist. Now, oh, well, the TheraBand is trying to do something to his shoulders. Yeah, we're not at shoulders yet. We're at throat. This is a rigid link that's also trying to twist his trunk, okay? So what's that TheraBand trying to do to his trunk? Twist him to the right or to his left? To his left, good. The external force is trying to create left transverse. So he needs muscles that are trying to create right transverse. Now, who are those muscles? I'm going to teach you that. And I'm going to teach you why they pull in the way they pull. But it's so important to at least understand how we figure out if muscles are working. Because if we can't figure out who's working, then it doesn't matter if you know who they are. Does that make sense? Like anybody can just memorize muscles, but do you know how to figure out if they're working? Or do you know how to make them work? Do you know how to stretch them? It's practical knowledge, Peeves. Did I say that right? Peeves? Or is that like a 10-year-old word? I don't know. My sons keep telling me that the words that I try to use to be cool are out of touch, so I keep working on it. Let's talk stretch. Let me, this is bad. Let me get the yoink, yoink, yoink. Okay. How did I teach you to identify what is being lengthened? Position. What is your position? So we need to establish what the trunk's position is, and then understand that any muscles that pull that way are being slacked, and any muscles that pull the opposite way are being stretched. Again, no different than you have all this precedent. You want to stretch hamstrings that are extensors, you got to flex the hip. You want to stretch flexors, you need to extend the hip. It's no different. You want to stretch plantar flexors like the calf, you got to dorsiflex. It's just applied in a different way, but it's the same concept. All skeletal muscles work the same. They all pull. How is his trunk rotated? And please don't tell me it's not rotated. That was a 310 question. Is he rotated to his right or to his left? Let me give you a hint. Which hip is his sternum currently looking at? His right hip or his left hip? His right hip. And if you wanted to get your sternum to look at your right hip, you'd have to twist to the right. This trunk is twisted to his right. So that means he's stretching muscles that pull to his left. I'm going to teach you who those are and why they are. But can we understand that, like, just knowing muscles alone doesn't help me to figure out, well, I'm stretching right here unless I know how these things work. I think we set that precedent with the darn sternocleidomastoid. That's tricky. Like, you do this and you're like, well, wait, isn't this one? So that's the precedent that, well, we got to slow down, do this in a process to make sure we get, guys, I've been doing this for a long time. I still have to wait. I'm here. I do this. Okay, this one's, this human movement is weird. It's not traditional. The cap in the bottle. We don't always open the bottle with the cap. We sometimes move the bottle. Exactly. All right, I think I have one more for you guys. I think so. Two more. Okay. What's that band trying to do to her trunk? Trying to twist her to the left. So she wouldn't need muscles that are also trying to twist her to the left. She would need muscles that are trying to twist her to the right. If you observe right transverse trunk rotation from this starting position, wouldn't that have to be concentric? Because the motion would be in the same direction as the muscles pulling, positive work. And then if she were to come back, it's the same muscles. The same muscles are on, but the motion is in the opposite direction of their pull, so that's what a negative is. Make sense? So from here, right transverse would be concentric over right transverse trunk rotators, and the left transverse to come back would be eccentric. If her left transverse was concentric, she'd be throwing back into the plate. All right, this is the last one. Clues. She hasn't started moving yet because the weight stack is not split. Does that make sense? So in other words, this is her start position. Now you could go to one of those machines and reposition it how you want. Okay? So she positioned it so that she started twisted how? How is her trunk twisted? Is it twisted to the right, to the left, or is it not twisted at all? What hip is her sternum looking at? The right. She's twisted to her right. And that's how she's going to start. When she starts the pelvic girdle rotation, thus the trunk rotation, that's when she's going to actually do the work. That has to be concentric work because she's got to make that initial movement happen. In other words, it's kind of a cheat code. This is tricky from 310 because the pelvic girdle rotation is opposite the trunk motion. That's the cap in the bottle. So even though the pelvis is spinning to the right, her trunk is spinning to her left. We just established that she's twisted to her right. And so if she goes to anatomical position, the only way that can happen is if her trunk twists to the left. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, once she starts moving, that machine is trying to bring her back to that initial position. The machine is trying to twist her trunk to the right. Does that make sense? We have to look at muscles from the trunk. Guys, we don't look at muscles from the pelvis. You know why? Because pelvic girdle rotations can happen because of my right hip, because of my left hip, because of both hips, because of trunk. Pelvic girdle spins can happen because of things above, below, or combination. It's not the same muscles. But you know what is the same muscles? The trunk muscles are the same muscles. So we have to look at the agonist, not from pelvic girdle rotators, Those could be different things. Trunk rotators are the same things. Does everybody understand that that machine is trying to twist her to the right, her trunk to the right? So you know what muscles I don't need? Muscles that are also trying to twist me to the right. I need left transverse trunk rotators concentrically to make the left transverse trunk rotation happen and to allow the right transverse trunk rotation to happen. The part that I'm about to teach you should be the easiest part. Who are those muscles? I'm going to teach you how the left external works with the right internal to pull in the direction of right transverse. And I'm going to teach you how the right external works with the left internal. We're going to throw in some erectors there too, but they follow the same rules as the cervical. Pretty much your external obliques that I'm about to teach you are literally your sternocleidomastoids or your trunk. They run the same way. Yoink, yoink, yoink. Yoink, yoink, yoink. Instead of trying to pull your right ear, it's just trying to pull your right shoulder. And then, because obviously we don't have a lot of stuff up here, especially me, but we got a lot more stuff here, we need some help. We need some other muscles that are also trying to help force couple us. So we're going to have some internals that work with our externals as well. The machine is trying to twist her trunk to her right. Pelvis to the left, but the trunk to her right. Because if she goes back to anatomical, that machine is trying to take her back to that starting position. And you know how I know that's her starting position? Because that weight stack isn't split. If that weight stack was split, I knew she had to work to get to that position. But she hadn't started yet. She just got in. She's about to get going. Does that make sense? All right, guys, go to Unit 2 and pull up major muscles that influence motion at the trunk. Remember, your cross-sectional anatomy is just a teaching tool to help us learn one picture of the different functions of the muscle based on how they cross our potential 3 axes. But I don't care if you learn lists. I don't care if you memorize. The key thing, though, is that if you memorize muscles, you still have to know if they're working or not. Like that's just something that you just can't. You can practice. You can't just. I might memorize. Think of it like this. I might memorize a rule book about basketball. That doesn't mean I can play basketball. You see what I'm saying? But coach, why am I not on the team? I learned every word of this book. That's how to play basketball book. And he's like, great. Can you play? That's what practice is for us. That's playing. And that's how you get better at any skill. Okay. So those are your muscles. I give you the names, I give you the abbreviations, and I give you their directions of pull. Obviously, we're going to look at pictures of them, but this is what you're going to be accountable for. Here's how the muscles fit in the cross-sectional circle. It's a little bit bigger class than our cervical, but it makes sense. There's more stuff to influence down here than up here. Look, guys, for our cervical, somewhat circular, anterior, posterior, left, right, right transverse pullers, left transverse pullers. All we're doing is we're saying anterior flexion pullers, posterior extension pullers, right lateral bending pullers, left lateral bending pullers, left transverse rotation pullers, right transverse rotation down. The muscles of the trunk, remember how I emphasize how muscles have more purpose than just movement, stability. And for these muscles, they have even more purpose than that. It's influence motion. There's some stability involvement in terms of vertebral stabilization, they call it core stabilization. It's all to make sure our vertebrae don't have too much hypermobility. But in addition to even that, protect our organs, like to be a line of defense for our spleen, liver, appendix, and bladder. Like, so if you notice, I like to start off with this kind of functional picture that these muscles that we're about to show are kind of layered. There's like no different than like a bicep is on top of a brachialis or a gastrocs on top of a soleus, but they're layered. But they also have something that's really, really cool, and that's a common sheath, a common tendinous inscriptional sheath, so that when a right external that doesn't cross my belly button works with a left internal, they have a structure to transfer the force across that boundary. The muscle itself doesn't cross the border, but this tendinous sheath that you see there is an inert tendinous structure that can transfer force from all those different muscles and all those different layers. It's like the muscles exist in these little pockets, and the fascia that's formed in between can help transfer those forces from those different muscles when they're working together to influence motion of the trunk. It's really kind of cool. So layer one is like the most superficial. That's why, like, I mean, I could do it, but I'm super modest. But like, if I wanted to, I could show you like these really ripped abs that I have that I got because I took a black Sharpie and I drew like little pockets. Guys, work with me. I'm just trying to be silly. But if you see someone's abs, the reason you can see them is because they're superficial. They're out in the front, right? Our coach used to call them show me muscles, right? The reason you can see the bicep is because it's the most superficial muscle. Make sense? So it makes sense why, like the rectus abdominis, the kind of pocket abs that are broken up with these tendinous inscriptions, because these are going to help muscles that are trying to crisscross applesauce transfer forces across. Guys, think of it like this. If we didn't compartmentalize this, this muscle would get ripped apart as muscles are trying to pull across from it. This breaking it up into little pockets helps when we're trying to pull across. Make sense? But that's the most superficial. And then we go externals, which are below it, internals, which are below that, then our transverse, and I'm going to explain what the function of that is at the end. So our transverse abdominis is our deepest. No more dad jokes, bro. This is another view of the different layers. Ogres have layers. All right, one last dad joke. But the white stuff is how we can transfer forces across the border that is our belly button. like again, remember in the erector spinae, I was like, guys, no muscles cross the spine. It's the same. Notice our right sterno stayed on the right side of our Adam's apple. Like we don't have muscles that cross over into our midline. So, but we still have to have muscles that work with other muscles on the other side. So the easiest way to transfer those forces across is through these inner tendinous inscriptions that these muscles are housed in. This is going to be fun. Another example of the different pockets. All right, let's first start off with transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis, and the only reason I'm talking about it is because it sounds very motiony, transverse abdominis, transverse rotation. But the transverse abdominis doesn't have joint motion. You know what the transverse abdominis is? It's literally your interthecal pressure muscle. It's if you squeeze in the middle of a bottle of fresh toothpaste, more pressure goes out and down as you squeeze in the middle. Your transverse abdominis starts on one side of your spine, it reverses to the other side of your spine. It's like your trunk, it's a sphincter muscle. And so when it contracts, that's how you generate interthecal pressure. You contract that transverse abdominis and you squeeze the middle of your toothpaste and pressure goes up and down. Okay? This muscle in therapy, you're going to see a lot of people do lumbar stabilization stuff, because if the muscle's going from one side of the spine to the other, it's going to be very important to maintain spinal stability. So I'm not saying it's not an important muscle. It's just, in order to think of it like this, if this muscle literally goes from here to there, if I'm trying to twist my trunk, I need something that's going to kind of pull at the ribs across this way. In other words, because it goes from one end to the other, it cancels each other out. Like whatever's trying to do this is also trying to do that. And they cancel, so that way it just constricts and contracts, just like pyloric sphincter or another. Okay? So the transverse abdominis, interthecal pressure. Think of it like this too. When people use the term like tighten your core when you're doing certain things, isn't it easier to move objects that are rigid than objects that are loose? Like my mom used to say, you like she'd pick up a baby or somebody and say, oh, it's a sack of potatoes, because the baby's just going, right? So when we create rigidity, or even interlocking your legs when you're doing pull-ups, when you create rigidity, it makes it easier to do that work as opposed to being loose, right? If you've ever had a roommate that you've had to climb up stairs with them on your back, it's a heck of a lot harder when they're passed out than it is when they're rigid. Or, if I wanted to pick up my sons and I said, put your arms locked out and be rigid, it's easier to pick him up than, if he's, so again, this helps to create rigidity, which thus makes it easier for us to do work on ourselves. All right, guys, external and internal obliques. Let's start off with the internals, because we're going from deep to superficial. How many of you guys know who Chewbacca is? Arr, arr, arr. Chewbacca is famous for his belt. Chewbacca's belt. And Chewbacca has, like, I don't know why he has it. It's, I guess, fashion in Kashyyyk. But Chewbacca has like this single strap belt that runs across. If I were to pull, now remember in the sterno, I said ear, but it's a mastoid process, but it's by your ear, it's very close. If I were to take a strap that runs like Chewbacca's belt with an angle this way, I would pull in a direction of left transverse. For your body, the right side of Chewbacca's belt is going to be your right external oblique, and the completion of Chewbacca's belt is going to be the left internal oblique. Make sense? So your internal obliques run like this, and your external obliques run like this. Dr. George, who taught this class, he started in 1975, a year before I was born. And when he retired, I took his place, meaning that the stuff I'm teaching you has been taught here since 1975. And every now and then I like to work in some George analogies, because he's not doing well right now with He's sick. He said the obliques are kind of like having a holster. So your externals are like a holster, and the internals are like the gun that would fit inside of a holster, like a policeman would have a gun inside of a holster. They crisscross on each side. Your right external, more superficial. Your right internal, more deep. Left external, left internal. But the key thing is how they work across. And that's harder to see because you would need a picture. I have some pictures of it too. But right externals have the same angle, the same line of pull transversely as the left internal because it completes Chewbacca's belt. In essence, the right external with the left internal is trying to bring my right ribs to visit my left hip. And my left external and my right internal is trying to bring my left ribs to go visit my right hip. Make sense? So when you see these muscles by themselves, it kind of looks weird. But what I want you to visualize are this line of pull. Notice the angles, guys. That's why we did a little basic trick. Look at that quadrant. Some of this and some of that, right? This is in the exact same line of pull as these, my externals, on the other side. They have the same line of pull transversely. So what does the transverse is the hardest one to see. That's why I'll bring it up first. But knowing what we know about torques and moments and directions of pull, doesn't it make sense that my left internals are trying to bring my left ribs to my left hip? So it's a left lateral puller. The right is going to be a right lateral puller. The teeter-totter, left pull, right pull, left pull, right pull. The internal obliques are anterior to the trunk. So that means they're going to be flexion pullers. In the front. And the hardest one is the rotation pullers. Now, I think this is a cool view as well, because you can see the angulation of the left internal oblique. And literally, it's the example I gave you about the erector spinae. Left erector spinae is trying to pull left ear back, thus trying to make me look to the left. True? The internal obliques are trying to pull my front ribs back. The left internal oblique is trying to do this. Does that make sense? So the left internals are left transverse pullers. Sense? And the key, though, is that the left internal is trying to pull the left side back. The right external are trying to pull the right ribs forward, and that's how you get this force couple. Completion of the Chewbacca bellicles. Okay? When I get the videos that I'm going to be posting, when you click it, hopefully it'll better see the visual of their pull. All right? So if you're going to your circles, right internal oblique, trunk flexor, right lateral, right transverse pulls. Left internal oblique, trunk flexor, left lateral, left transverse pulls. Because that's how it pulls. Make sense? All right, external obliques. This picture is great for the frontal pull, like the teeter-totter. Right side is going to be a right lateral, left side is going to be a left lateral. This view doesn't give us a good show of the transverse, though. I mentioned this in the cervical. Two-dimensional pictures are limited in a three-dimensional concept. So we got to look at it in different ways to maybe see better views of the other pulls. This view is great for the lateral bending pulls, hopefully. You see that? Right side of the belly button pulls this way, left side of the belly button pulls that way. This is a good view of the flexion pull and the transverse pull. Flexion pull, because it's trying to pull ribs to pelvis anteriorly. And our internal obliques underneath, guys, maybe that picture is better. This projector is not the best. Underneath here lies the internal obliques that run like this. See on my fingers? Because they're crisscrossing, right? The right side is trying to bring the right ribs back, but the left side is trying to bring the right ribs forward. So the right external has the same transverse pull as the left internal. I'm just showing it to you in a different way. The right external is trying to bring right ribs forward, and the left internal is trying to bring the left ribs back. Which obliques would be stretched in this picture? Don't answer it right away. Let's figure it out. How is this trunk twisted? To his right. Twisted to his right. That means he has to be stretching muscles that pull to the left. True. Stretching left transverse trunk rotators. Who are the muscles that pull the trunk to the left transversely? Right external, left internal. That's how I'm trying to teach you to see this. Guys, the brass tacks, there may be a condition where you need to specifically stretch a left internal oblique, and I hope you know how to do it. That's it. I want my students to literally be able to apply this memorized knowledge. That's it. How would you stretch a left internal oblique? Well, slow down. What does it do? How does it pull? It's a trunk flexor, so extending would help. It's a left lateral bender, bending to the right would help. But the hardest one is, okay, how does it sit? It's a left transverse puller. I need to twist the trunk to the right. So you can't act normal during fitness photo. We will get there, absolutely. I wanted to just apply the oblique stuff, but absolutely, we're going to get into the erector. You know what's cool about the erector? It follows the same rules as the neck. They follow the same exact rules, but you're correct. But I was trying to get some application with the. All right, you guys, the good old rectus abdominis. When people say that someone has abs, this is what they're referring to. Again, it's the most superficial. But unlike, this isn't really a great picture because, I mean, this is an artist illustration. It's very similar to the sternos where you have a midline and you have a slip on the right side and you have a slip on the left side that are separately innervating. They can work together, just like the sternos could work together, but the sternos don't have to work together. Does that make sense? So it's like a teeter-totter, and you have a right side of the xiphoid and you have one on the left side of the xiphoid. And together, they're flexion pullers, but the right side is a right lateral puller and the left side is a left lateral puller. Now, here's some application fun. Those fibers, pretty straight up and down. Right? There's no angles there like we had in the sternos and right, pretty straight up and down. So in anatomical position, there is no transverse pull in anatomical position. Your circles are viewed from anatomical position. So if you look at your rectus abdominis, how it fits in your cross-sectional anatomy, you'll see left rectus, right rectus. Both of them are trunk flexion pullers. Right is a right lateral puller, left is a left lateral puller. But there's no rotation because in anatomical position, their pull is all in the Y. There's no combination there. Does that make sense? Now, what I am debating teaching you guys is when you get away from anatomical position, there's certain muscles in our body called midway muscles. And when you're in anatomical, nothing but the most expensive props. When in anatomical, that muscle runs straight up and down. But when I twist, it twists. And it would want to pull me back. And when I twist this way, it would want to pull me back. That's really cool. Having a muscle that could be useful when I get to the end of a range of motion in one direction, and also help me at the end of a range of motion in the other direction. Because remember, we don't want to move too much, especially when we're talking about twisting our spine. As you know what muscle spasms are from? That your body is like splints. That's your body basically saying you're done because we don't want to get hurt anymore. I'm going to think about that, whether I'm going to, I want to start asking these kind of things, but I'll give it some thought. All right. So what should we know so far? We should know that our left and right rectus together, it's a good view of it. I like this picture better because it shows our belly button. Right and left rectus are trunk flexors. The right rectus is a right lateral trunk bender. The left is a left lateral trunk bender. And I gave you that information two different ways. I gave it to you here. Look, right rectus, trunk flexor, right lateral. Left rectus, trunk flexor, left lateral. And I also gave it to you here. Make sense? The right external oblique would be an agonist, or I say agonist, it would be on the same team as the rectus, as all the different trunk flexors when I need trunk flexors. Like all the ones interior can help. In fact, I need them to because some of them want to bend me and the others want to bend me. They can cancel out here, they can cancel out there and just work to pull in that direction. So the right rectus, the right internal, and the right external have the same functions in terms of trunk flexion pull and right lateral pull. Does that make sense? In other words, they sit in the same part of class. They sit together. But you know what they don't do the same? The right internal does not have the same transverse pull as the right external. One's trying to bring the ribs forward on the right side. The other's trying to bring the ribs back on the right side. Make sense? So one of the biggest challenges to us, I was the same way when I was learning this stuff, is there are two different rights and lefts. You could do a cartwheel to the right, or you could spin to your right. Frontal plane versus transverse plane. Right and left doesn't mean anything in a sagittal. So making sure you don't confuse right lateral pull with right lateral spin, or right lateral pull with left lateral transverse spin. Sorry, I didn't mean to say lateral spin. Making sure we see right lateral, left transverse. But we have precedent for that, guys. Our sternos did that. My right was a right lateral, but a left transverse. This is nothing we haven't had on the first test. Once again, I'm purposefully withholding a rector because I want to make sure we get the obliques. Which obliques would be working here? This is how I want you to process. Don't go right to the muscles. Utilize the 310 tools that I gave you. External forces trying to do this. I know I need muscles that pull that way. Who are those muscles? And I'm not asking about erectors, just tell me obliques. It's either the right external and left internal, or the left external and right internal. Give it some thought. Even share your answer with someone who sits near you in class. See if y'all get the same thing. If you don't, talk it through. This is where learning happens. This is how we get right answers on tests. Which obliques is shorter? You see what I mean by we're not just going to say core? Because core could mean different antagonists, different agonists. If she flips it around, she's not working the same muscles. We have to be able to state which muscle. Use core all you want with your clients and your patients, but we need to know the specific muscles. Agonist, left transverse rotators or right transverse rotators? Cable is trying to twist her to the left, true? So she needs muscles that are pulling to the right. We've identified who we're going to light up. We need right transverse trunk rotators. Our circles help us to see who those muscles are. Our list could tell us who those muscles are. Doesn't matter to me. But in this exercise, holding this position, she would be using her left external and her right internal isometrically to hold that position. She needs muscles that are pulling, she needs her Chewbacca belt turn like this to try to pull in a direction of right transverse because that exercise is trying to twist her. That exercise is trying to bring her right shoulder to her left hip, so she needs muscles that are trying to bring her left shoulder to her right hip. Does that make sense? And the muscles that run that way are left external, right external. If you observe right transverse rotation, concentric. If she comes back with the left, eccentric. We established trunk flexors, right? So that'd be everybody in the front. Right and left rectus, right and left external, right and left internal. Cool? All right, last one, and I'll let you guys go. What group did we say? Dumbbells trying to do this. So what group? Muscles that are pulling this way. Who are the ones we've talked about so far? Right rectus, right external, right internal. And again, we're coming with the erect, but I just wanted to apply the anterior muscles first. Does that make sense? On the test, I might say, identify one agonist and the type of contraction. So I might have right internal, I might have right external, I might have right rectus. But at least you know all of those sit in the same place that I need for this exercise. All right, I'll no, I think we did this. Yeah, we did this with the stretch. We would have the stretching. Any questions? Y'all talk way too much. Yeah, I will go.